welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by Dwight H. Little, filmmaker, and he just wrote his memoirs, Still Rolling Inside the Hollywood Dream Factory. It's very cool to have you here.
I wrote them for you, buddy.
I had a great time reading. Now, I will admit, they were a little late getting me my copy. I got it last night, almost midnight, but I actually stayed up all night and read it.
Are you serious? You got it last night?
Yes. I don't want to throw them under the bus. I'm sure it was a...
Well, thank you so much for taking a look at it, man.
No, it was a really good read. I'm not just saying that because you're here. I started reading it, and I really like you're very honest about the ups and downs of filmmaking, but you can still see your love of movies throughout the whole story.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad it was a good read for you.
Yeah. And so, when did you start writing it?
Well, I had ideas about it because I had been doing these little guest lectures at UCLA, these evening sort of, what do they call them? Well, that's just a guest lecture. And there were so many questions from so many kids about so many topics, and I couldn't fit it into 45 minutes. So I thought, well, maybe I should write this stuff down. And then all of a sudden, our little friend COVID arrived, and I had time on my hands, like we all did. Yeah. And I thought if there was ever a time/excuse to write this book, now would be it. So it's my COVID book.
Right. It is interesting. So many different creative things came out of COVID. Not that we were happy we had, a shutdown or anything, but.
Well, you're just forced into thinking different thoughts. And you can't go out much. So, there you are.
Yeah, I live in a small town, so I walked a lot, and I listened to many audiobooks. And that's when I decided I'm going to listen to The Stand for the first time, because it's 40 hours. And It started right away about this disease spreading around. And I was like, this is probably not the book to read at this moment, because this was early on.
The walk itself is certainly good for you.
Yeah. I've not just about me, but I've lost half my body weight, 180 pounds over the last few years. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what town? Where are you? Where are we online from? Where?
We're not live yet, but I'm in Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. All right, got it.
A little town, Cape Cod. So very small town. So I could walk around and not really be around anybody.
Well, that's the way it has to be in COVID times.
Yeah. So what was the process like to go back, and think about everything? Think about all your movies. And
well, the hard part was a little bit of the structure of it, trying to figure out the structure. And then I realized something I hadn't thought of before, which is I've had two careers. I was in movies, starting off in indies and B movies and kind of working up to studio pictures. That was like part one of my life. And then I switched over to network television, including series and TV movies. And that took me another 20 years or so. And then I thought, okay, that's a very interesting perspective. Not a lot of people have spent time like that in both worlds. Mm-hmm. And then when I thought about it, I said, that's how I should write the book. It should be about the film and the TV and how it's really a different job directing for film and for television. People might be interested to know how that is different.
Yeah, and reading a book, it's definitely, and it also has changed a lot throughout the time you were doing it.
Well, and it's changing now as we're speaking. I mean, I think the after effect of these strikes and the conglomerations and the condensing of the business, I think in 3 to 5 years, it's going to be very hard to recognize. There's shit is happening.
Right. I don't know if you could predict, but where do you see things going in the next few years after the strike?
Well, I think it's going to come down to 3 content. Listen, I don't know what I'm talking about since you asked. I'm just I'm talking out of the top of my head.
Sure.
I think there's going to be 3 content providers. I think 2 of them will continue to be Silicon Valley, some version of Netflix and Amazon, basically Silicon Valley providers. And then there'll be maybe 2 or 3 legacy studios. They've already gobbled up 20th Century Fox. Disney gobbled them up. Disney's talking about unloading ABC. I think you're going to see Paramount and Sony absorbed. I think we're going to end up with a few legacy movie studios making primarily branded entertainment, which is almost where we are already. Marvel, DC, etc. Event programming, and then I don't know, and then the Netflix, Amazon people, they'll be able to finance smaller, what we used to call indie movies. I just saw one on Netflix called Reptile with Benicio del Toro, and that was a standalone movie made for Netflix, and it's something that even 5 years ago would have been made by, a small independent company. But that's all. No one has the money to pay for that now. So the short answer is, I think more conglomeration, very few content providers, and kind of, what do we have for cell phones? We have Verizon and AT&T, right? It's like three.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a couple more. I don't know.
So over the years, when I've talked to people about like the rise of streaming, it really depends on people that were around a long time, veterans. Like they weren't huge on streaming. I think younger people liked it because there's more platforms. How do you feel about the rise of streaming?
Well, I like it in concept. I just wish it hadn't wiped out the independent film business, because it has overseas. And, yeah, there's an A24 that's still kind of struggling to hang on. But most of the things we used to think of as, Focus and all these, well, what then Miramax and these smaller companies, it's just not viable to release an $18-20 million movie into theaters. And it's just, unfortunately, it's not there. And I think that once they dropped House of Cards, all however many episodes, and everybody binge watched them, then binging became a thing. So I feel like the unintended consequence of streaming was it wiped out the indie movie business. I mean, Spielberg's been talking about this for years. Like, you're going to be left with a few marquee movies that you'll pay $17 for. And if he also said, and he got in a lot of trouble for this, that if you make a movie whose final destination is to be seen on TV, it is by definition, it's a TV movie. Like, that's what it is. I mean, you can say it's a feature on Netflix, but it's not. It's a TV movie. That's my view.
And so what are the differences for a cinematic movie and a TV movie?
I think that, first of all, in movies up till now, generally you've had more time to explore and create original characters. The shooting time was longer. The post-production time was longer. The music, the scoring, the whole thing would have a much more, a longer creative arc. And when you're doing something on a tight budget and it's much smaller money, a lot of decisions have to be made that aren't always the best creatively. I also think that you're reaching a what used to be called the cinephiles, people who knew movies, who appreciated movies. And when you just throw something up on Netflix to a really broad audience, I mean, you can see the kind of content that hits a nerve. What is it? There's a Korean show where everybody gets killed, and it was like the number one thing they'd ever done. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what is that? Is it a movie?
Right.
I don't know what that is exactly.
I've noticed a lot of stuff on Netflix that'll be really big. Over like the next year or so, no one ever talks about it again. Like Bird Box was like this huge movie, but
there's no staying power. They're forgotten the minute they're done airing. They're forgotten. One of the things about my films, such as they are, mm-hmm. is that they run on forever on cable, which is, Mark for Death, Rapid Fire, Murder at 1600, Halloween 4, Phantom of the... These movies run all the time because they're standalone movies. But you're right. If you see a Hulu thing, with the minute you're done watching it, it's over. It's never revisited.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think of, I went to the Aero Theater, which is one of our revival theaters here in Santa Monica, and watched a screening of No Country for Old Men, you know. And I mean, that's a work of art that will be viewed many, many years from now. It's just a standalone artistic creation. And it holds up like it was made yesterday. Now, I don't know what the Netflix version of that is.
Yeah, I agree. Oddly enough, I just read the book for the first time, which
Oh my God.
is fantastic. And sometimes I usually read the book after the movie, and I'll think, wow, even if I like the movie, wow, they really missed something. But that is a movie they really captured the book and all the characters they cast perfectly.
Well, we missed them. We missed the Coen brothers. I don't know where they are. It's almost like,
Just though the one has a new movie coming out, but they didn't do it together.
well, you know, for a while there, almost every time they did a movie, it was so, even when they missed, it was fantastic. You know, and I don't know if we have those film artists working in the Netflix, and I don't mean to pick on Netflix, it could be any of them, but, you know, in that orbit, you know, David Fincher, I think, does things, but his name is in from movies. The other big problem is where are you going to get stars once this generation ages out? Where are the stars going to come from? Because the streaming people, they just cannibalize movie stars. You know, it's like, oh, let's get John Cena or let's get The Rock or let's get somebody, but their names were made in movies. And so where's Matt Damon going to come from once there's no Bourne Identity? Where's that guy going to come from?
It's interesting. Oddly enough, I also do a pro wrestling podcast, which is very different, but it's kind of the same thing in there because they keep bringing back John Cena and Rock are actually back now in WWE, and a lot of people are like, you know, they need to build the new stars for the next generation instead of always bringing back, you know, guys from the previous era.
Well, who's a new movie star? You know, I mean, obviously Ryan Gosling's a movie star. You can name a few, but they didn't make their name in television. I mean, or in streaming. Also, when you have a company like Apple making product, what is their film division on their balance sheet? I don't know. It's a percentage of their business, right? Their entertainment line item is almost inconsequential.
So to get back to your book here, I didn't want to, but I know this is very interesting. Hope I find it interesting. Hope other people find it interesting. And I did want to get back to the book though, because Halloween 4. It's funny because when I first was doing some research on Halloween 4, a lot of stuff I read online is not the same that's in your book, which I found very interesting. Another reason why it's good for people to read your book. So when the first script you see for Halloween 4 that you didn't like, was that the one written by John Carpenter, or had that already been gone by the time?
No, his name wasn't. What I read was not an actual script. What was presented to me by Mustafa and his number two, whose name I don't remember, but it was a treatment. And I do think that the men whose names are on the movie, with Alan, there's a couple other writers, they had been involved with that treatment. But it was very unlike what Alan McElroy and I were trying to do. And it was closer to what you'd think of as a traditional teenagers have to get killed kind of thing. I thought, well, first of all, this was 1988, and we had just gone through this massive cycle of Prom Night and Terror Train and, you know, a lot of, well, we'd already had the Friday the 13th series and Freddy series, so it seemed stale to me. I mean, even if it was going to be Michael, it just seemed stale. They wanted Michael back. Obviously, that was the whole point. And Alan and I had to try and come up with some pseudo-credible way to get Michael back. And so, you know, we had him as a burn patient in a coma for 10 years in the basement of a hospital. And, you know, we tried to work that out as best we could. But I don't know. I pitched them what I would call I wanted to do a police procedural, and it threw them off at first because I said, look, you have a detective, in this case, Loomis, who's really a doctor, not a policeman, on the pursuit of an escaped serial killer. Okay, that's Silence of the Lambs. I mean, not exactly, but it's a police procedural. It's a true crime story. Mm-hmm. I said, if we do it like that and pay attention to the details, like if you're going to get overalls, he's got to kill the guy in the gas station, get the overalls. If he's going to knock down the power lines, he's got to do the telephone lines, do it with the truck. He throws Bucky into the power lines and shut it down. You know, everything is very thought out. As he approaches Haddonfield, he gets the mask from a drugstore. So we tried, and then Loomis is just knows where he's going. He knows he's going for the niece, and he's just in pursuit. And I think when I pitched them that it took them a minute. They didn't know if they liked it when they heard it. But I persuaded them that this was the way to go. And then I also pitched them the ending, which even worked on paper, works great in the movie.
Mm-hmm. So, the ending is kind of supernatural. Did you ever want more like supernatural stuff elements throughout the whole movie? Because you also talk about being more realistic, I guess.
Yeah, no, it was just that it was really the ending that the curse of Michael is transferred into Jamie Lloyd to give it that sort of twist ending. I think there is a line that Alan wrote in the police station where someone says, like, what is he? What is he? I think Alan's line was, he's evil on two legs. And which, kind of leaves that it's true, but it also leaves it somewhat open.
Yeah. That's what I think is scary about the first movie is, you don't know if he's just a person who, what is evil? Is that a supernatural thing, or is it just a human who's, just killing people?
Well, in the old days, I mean, this is where the idea of possession comes from, because human beings who behave like monsters, the only explanation was that they were possessed, right? They couldn't just be a whacked out human doing this. It had to be the devil. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's always a very fine line. But we did touch on the supernatural, of course, at the end with, Jamie's curse and all that.
Yeah. And the Loomis character, to me, is always what really sells the evil of Michael, especially in that first movie. There's really not that many deaths. It's just Loomis is, talk about how evil he is, and he's a man of science, and he's like come to the conclusion he's just evil, and you have to keep him locked up. What was Donald Pleasance himself like? Because you don't talk about him too much in the book.
Well, he was, I was a bit in awe, honestly, because I was old enough to know The Great Escape and some of these amazing, places that he'd been. I found Donald to be very professional. He needed to know everything, where he was, what his character was doing, he needed, which he should have. He needed to have everything laid out for him in a meaningful way. I did notice that he was an older gentleman that he would tire easily. So, and when he tired, he got a little cranky. So I figured if I had 5 great hours with Donald, and so what I would do is just schedule the day so he's not hanging around for 14 hours and get the best out of him, and then let him go and schedule other work in that day. And once I really did the schedule for him, I found that his energy and his just focus just really came up. But he was, he was getting up there then.
Mm-hmm. And maybe you wouldn't know this, but do you know how he felt about the Dr. Loomis character? Because as you mentioned, previous generation, he's like a great actor, and then later on, a lot of people know him as Dr. Loomis. So I don't know.
Well, I think he felt like he was slumming at first, but the English actors they have a bit of a tradition of just working. Do you know what I mean? It's like him not being too. Even Laurence Olivier, even later in his career, like was taking acting gigs. Michael Caine is in bad B movies. These guys are a little more like if it's a job and if I can do well in it, I'll take it. But I do think I'm not sure anybody imagined what was going to happen with Halloween 1. I mean, the way that caught on. And I do feel like he was protective of Dr. Loomis. I don't think he ever realized he'd be known as Dr. Loomis, but he stopped. He wasn't, I think by Halloween 4, he wasn't fighting it anymore. Mm-hmm. It was like, this is something that's happened to me as an actor. And you hear this a lot with actors where they'll fight it for a while, and then Robert Englund's the same way. You know, he did a lot of character actor work before Freddy. Mm-hmm. He was in Gary Busey movies, and he was the voice of Big Wednesday. He was a working character actor. And then once Freddy happened, like, well, do I fight it or do I lean into it? And he just decided this is kind of a blessing. I'm a horror movie actor.
Yeah, and you can tell at conventions he really loves it. That's another thing I think if Donald Pleasance was around, later on, he also would have benefited because he could have made a good living, like Robert Englund doing the convention.
Oh, yeah, Robert goes out a lot. Bill Moseley goes out a lot. Yeah. And so does Danielle. I just did a little movie with the three of them, which we're all excited about. If you can let your fans know. Again,
I have a little tidbit about that because my friend and sometime co-host here, Treacherous Trista Robinson, actually plays the monster in this movie.
Oh, no kidding.
Hopefully I can say, yeah.
Of course. That's a movie that, like, I was talking to Robert Englund about this, because when we did Phantom of the Opera, it was an extremely polarizing movie. The Andrew Lloyd
By the way, Natty Knocks is the name of the movie. I forgot.
Natty Knocks. So, and we'll talk about that only in the sense that Phantom of the Opera, the gore people just hated all the opera, and the Lloyd Webber Broadway people just hated all the gore, and everybody was pissed off. Mm-hmm. And then 20 years later, the Blu-ray comes out, and this movie, people saw it for what it is, not what they thought it was going to be. And now Robert and I both get a lot of really good attention about that movie. People love it now. And then, what I'm talking about is his version, Robert's version of the Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
In a similar way, Natty Knocks, which has just come out, because it's Bill and Robert and Danielle, there was a lot of expectation that there might be, kind of a gore movie. And it's just a fun Halloween movie. And the people that want to have a fun Halloween movie love it, 4 stars. The people who wanted like an Eli Roth kind of slaughter are kind of pissed off. So it's a very polarizing movie, but I really encourage people to watch it because you will have a great time. Bill Moseley's fantastic in that.
Yeah, big Bill Moseley fan. Another, been on the show many times. So where can people see Natty Knocks?
So I'll tell you, it's all on Amazon and iTunes and all the places, but it is for free on Tubi right now.
Oh, so sweet. I'm a big fan of Tubi.
If anybody wants to see it for free on Tubi, it's right there.
Yeah. And from what I understand from my independent filmmaker friends, Tubi is actually one of the better places that pays the filmmakers.
Well, it's blowing up, Tubi. I didn't know much about it even a year ago. But it's what they call AVOD, advertising video on demand. And it's just taken off because I guess the younger audience doesn't really mind that there's a commercial break. They kind of check their device anyway.
Right.
And so people are a little less inclined to order something for $7.99, but to see Freevee or Tubi, it seems those are growing, those platforms.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so we were talking about Robert Englund and your version of Phantom of the Opera. And you were talking earlier, too, about kind of the connection to Donald Pleasance, like he didn't know if he should, run with the Freddy character. So did he have any apprehension playing the Phantom of the Opera because not just that it's horror, but it's another guy with a burnt face, so it's a similar look in a way.
Well, but again, I think what he saw there was a chance to do something different, but in the universe of what he was known for.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, there was still, and of course, the marketing people tried to sell Freddie, you know, but it was in the same universe, but it was obviously very different. So I think there was a little bit of a win-win in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it had been a part that had been played by horror icons in the past. And he wanted, I think, to add his take on it. He's great in the film if you have a chance.
Yeah, yeah, no, I actually watched it recently. I watched it when it came out, and I've seen it since, but I watched it recently for the interview.
And does it play differently for you all these years later?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll be honest. When I saw it, I think I was probably in junior high when it came out, and I probably did think it was going to be more of a traditional, like a Freddy movie. And watching it now as as an adult, yeah, it plays totally different for me. And the sets are amazing. It's something I really appreciate now. I think honestly, I think the sewer sets, all of it looks good, but the sewer sets, I think, is really when the movie like hits it for me.
Well, the score is absolutely unbelievable. Misha Seagal did the score, and he just did Natty Knocks.
Very cool.
He's a great composer, and he wrote original opera music for that movie, Don Juan Triumphant. And it's just the movie, the music, the color, the wardrobe, the production value, the performances. I'm very proud of that movie, and I think that's gonna keep living on, that one.
Yeah, and that's something that not all genres of movies do. Like if a drama, if no one really liked it at one point, it's probably never going to find an audience. But horror movies seem to either find new audiences or people just keep watching them over decades.
Well, there's people can't get enough of Halloween 4, as you know. Yeah. Now that being said, no one loved us when that was either. I mean, the audience did.
Yeah.
But we got pretty heavily bashed by the critics. But they like it now.
Mm-hmm. So was there did you have like an idea of where 5 would take the Danielle Harris?
Yeah, Alan and I had an idea for that. And it's really my fault. It's not Mustafa's fault, because he wanted me to do 5. And I was sort of stuck in this whole thing we're talking about with Donald Pleasance. I thought, well, if I do 5, then I'm really going to be pigeonholed as that guy. And I had other ambitions for myself. And I wanted to just show other sides to me. And eventually I did do weird things for me, like Free Willy 2. Murdered 1600 is a much more traditional detective story. And so Alan and I weren't able to bring 5 to fruition. And I've never watched the whole thing, to be honest with you, because it just wasn't carried on properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it really sets up for the Danielle Harris character to be the next, killer.
Oh yeah, it's all laid out, and I don't know what happened with 5, but anyway, I don't want to speak poorly, because
sure, but it is. I will say that they're already talking about rebooting Halloween, even though they just did the new trilogy. I've seen a lot of people say, instead of a direct sequel to 1, why don't we get a direct sequel to Part 4 to see what happens to that character? And
let's do the proper sequel to 4.
Yeah.
And in my view, Sasha died, but you have Ellie still alive. I know they killed her in 5, but if it was a direct sequel to 4, you still have Rachel Carruthers, because she was alive at the end of 4, and Jamie, and so it'd be interesting to do a Halloween 4 sequel.
Yeah. And now there's weird rules. They did direct sequel to Part 2, and then a few years later, or 10 years later, they do a direct sequel to 1, and so who knows? Maybe it's possible.
Well, then the Rob Zombie stuff, I don't know what, that was all off on another tangent altogether.
Yeah, it is weird, because when I was a kid growing up, I could watch all the Friday 13th in a row and all these movies in a row, now I do think like if I was watching for the first time, it'd be very strange because they'd start, they'd end, they'd reboot, and then they'd start. Then there'd be like a sequel to the older ones. It'd
Well,
be
then
very hard to follow.
Danielle Harris is in the Rob Zombie
Right,
movies.
right.
It's like, wait, what?
Yeah, it's like an alternate reality of the. Yeah, it's very weird. So, something I found really interesting when reading your stuff about Halloween 4. So you start off talking that your family and friends are like warning you, like don't do like a not just a horror movie, but like a sequel of a franchise part 4. And you even say that you don't always choose a project just for artistic decision. But then later on, as you're talking about Halloween 4, you say this is the movie for that time that you're the most has the most of you in it. So it does become like first maybe it's not just an artistic like decision, but you become part of that movie. So does when does that happen? When do you like go from like I'm just going to do this because I'm going to get in the guild and all these things to like, oh, this is really something that I want to do, and
when
it's so personal to me.
Work with Alan on the story, I think I started to get excited about it. And then I think I mentioned in the book, I did some research about Halloween.
Yeah. And in New England, where I am.
Yeah. And I started to see these images of, just that whole harvest experience and the end of, I don't know, I suddenly got all inspired. And also I had done a lot of, Midwestern trick-or-treating. So this was not out of my wheelhouse. I kind of knew what that felt like. And I mentioned about that in Free Willy too, as well. I mean, I had some personal connection, but no, many, many, many decisions in the filmmaking career are driven by, you have to make a living. It's not a hobby. you have to work. You have to work for money. Period.
Mm-hmm. But there has to be I assume there has to be a balance between, or does it always happen like, okay, I'm doing this because I'm getting paid, obviously, but do you always get sucked into the movie then?
Yes, always. You start off thinking, well, I'm a mercenary. I'm gonna, I'm sorry, I put my phone down. That I'm gonna get involved for money, and I'm just gonna not. But you get emotionally attached sooner or later.
Is that good or bad? Because I could see
great.
it being.
No, it's great.
All right,
it's great because now you're just all in. You're in up to your elbows, and you just make the best movie. It's like sometimes I make the analogy to people: if you're a lawyer and you spend all these years learning these skills, you don't always get to pick your client. Well, I'm just going to defend innocents who are wrongly accused. It doesn't go that way. You're going to use your skills to defend the innocent, the guilty, all kinds of people. And your job is to be a really good lawyer and not to have too much judgment about whether you like the client or not. That's kind of how I think of it. Okay, I have these skills as a director and I'm going to apply them as best I can. And I don't love all the clients the same, but you can love your own professional skills.
Yeah, no, I know I like that about the book, and I like that. I don't think you could probably really make something. And you always go in and rewrite the script if you don't like the script to make it something that you want to make.
Exactly.
So I really like your story with the first time you meet Steven Seagal and a gun is involved, and so that doesn't disappoint my my imagination of what the man is like.
Immediately a gun is involved.
Yeah, so I won't spoil it totally. But so when you're actually working with him, because I've had some former guests on the show who worked with him who honestly aren't big fans of his, and they said that he would take liberties with people he was in fight scenes with because they couldn't really fight back, but he could hit them. Did you ever witness anything like that?
No, I know that's a common, urban fact or fiction. I'm assuming it may have done it, but Stephen was on his way up when I worked with him.
That's true too. Yeah.
And he had done Above the Law, which hadn't made a lot of money, but people took notice. Hard to Kill did make money, which is a movie he did not like. Mm-hmm. And then when he came to us, his cachet was on its way up. And he is also, man, this was a very young, I mean, compared to now,
Sure.
fit man, very
Right.
athletic man. He is a black belt in Aikido. He's more than capable of hurting somebody. I never saw him hurt anybody. I think people got banged around, but they're stunt men and
Right. Like I said, I do a wrestling podcast too, and they're not out to hurt each other, but falling down is going to hurt. There's no,
yeah, and
you
the
can't
way
fake gravity or something.
you can't take gravity, right? So I never. He's difficult in one sense, but I never saw this mean streak that I hear about. I never saw that. So
Yeah, so I did have Tom Wright on from your movie, and he was not a big fan of Steven, but again, I don't know.
however, am a huge fan of Tom Wright.
Yeah, I am too. He was a
I
great guest
just
on the
think
show.
he's the greatest. So if you ever talk to him, tell him Dwight Little said hi.
I will definitely do that. Yeah. So what was it like to revisit? So when you're doing Natty Knocks, work with Danielle Harris again and Robert Englund.
Well, it was just hysterical because she's like the real estate mom. And then the last time I had worked with her, she was little Jamie Lloyd.
Right.
So we had an awful lot of fun. And, I would always confuse her on set and called her Jamie when her character was Diane, whatever her name was. And she was sold real estate. And she had these kids, and her husband is leaving her, and she has this babysitter to try and look after the younger one while she's away. And so there were all these grown woman problems. But she's just grown into a very good adult actress. In other words, you can give her any scene, give her any line, and she is not like a one-trick horror pony. You could cast her in anything.
No, yeah, she's a legit, very good actor. Yeah, it was fun. I forgot I mentioned when I was reading your book, and you almost did the previous movie with Seagal. If that would have been your follow-up to Halloween 4, I thought you would have been the coma guy, like because Michael Myers comes out of the coma.
Yeah.
And Steven Seagal
Well, that was right. That was all happening, and I was part of the reason I couldn't do 5. But it's just as well that Hard to Kill didn't work out. Marked for Death, I think, is a better movie.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the early Seagal movies. I think they're they're fun action movies, but I think they're good movies too.
I think it grows up through Under Siege 1. Mm-hmm. I think that was like the pinnacle. The Andy, the director, but he did Above the Law, and then he also did Under Siege, and I think all throughout For Justice, up through Under Siege, he really peaked, and it was really good filmmaking. And then there was this slow diminishing returns. And it really kind of went upside down when he started to want to direct. Then it didn't go so well.
Yeah. So, does that, I guess I was to say, does that work out? But it obviously has worked out. There's some great actors who directed their own stuff. Like stuff, so.
And more. Who's a great director is Ben Affleck. He's a great director. I don't know if you saw the Nike one.
Yeah, I go see almost. I'm not just a horror guy. I go see almost every movie that comes out. And yeah, that was a big surprise. I thought that movie was great. I know some of my friends like, well, who cares about Air Jordans? I'm like, that's like saying Rocky is you can only like if you like boxing. I mean, it's about that, but that's not really what the movie's about.
No, he did. Well, of course, what did he do? The Town, and he did Argo. He won an Oscar. I mean, but there's an actor who arguably a better director than anything. He's a really good director.
Yeah, and when I mentioned I go see everything, like I agree with you. Obviously, I watch a lot of stuff online too because to do the show and everything. But there's nothing like seeing a movie in the theater.
No, I'm very anxious. Friday night, I'm going to go see the new Creator movie.
Oh yeah, I didn't get to go see it last week because I was busy, but I'm gonna go see it Saturday. I'm really excited. It looks the trailers look great.
It does really look good. It's had mixed The critics were all over the place on that, and the box office was soft. But I'm very keen to see it.
Yeah, no, and I always like artificial intelligence stories. I always think they're interesting. I did a show once. I think you can take it back to Pinocchio as kind of like the first artificial intelligence story.
I think almost every movie that comes out now,
It'll be about.
it gets split in terms of the critical response.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Almost everything, and I don't know about box office anymore. I don't know what people want to pay to see.
True. And I think that's a problem with Rotten Tomatoes, is because divisive movies, if people really love it or they hate it, it'll have like a 40 or 50%. And the stuff that is like 80 or 90%, it's usually stuff that people just, even if they just think it's okay, they'll hit thumbs up. So it doesn't really mean it's great. It just means the majority of people think it's not bad.
Well, that's right. Where we came in on Natty Knocks, we came in like at 40% or something, but if you look at even the negative reviews, they don't. It's not that they don't like the movie; they don't like their expectations of the movie, and they're reviewing what they wish it was rather than what it is. And Rotten Tomatoes, I don't think overall is helpful.
I don't think so either. I always just kind of roll my eyes when anyone even mentions it, like, oh, that has whatever percent. Yeah. And I was like, who cares?
There are movies that have 90% that you wouldn't want to wish on your worst enemy.
Right. So, how did you, especially earlier in your career, how did you look at critiques of your film? Since the movie itself is personal to you, how did you take the critics?
Well, I don't make art house movies, so
right.
I've never been anybody's darling, and I just kind of had to accept that, early on. It's at first it stings to tell you the truth. Like I made a Joe Don Baker movie called Getting Even, which is this crazy 80s action movie. And, of course we got massacred by the critics, but it's really fun. I mean, it's just balls out 80s guns and ammo helicopter action movie.
Yeah.
And then when I realized that everybody hated that, I realized, well, they're looking for something else, and it's not just really about me. And then Phantom, and I kind of got used to it, to tell you the truth. I don't like it. I'd rather hear good news than bad news.
Of course, yeah.
But I'm not making, The English Patient, where, people with Shakespeare in Love, or movies where critics are going to kind of fawn over it. They're B genre movies. That's the Joe Bob Briggs movies.
Yeah.
That's what they are. And if you like you gotta like Mark for Death, or if you like an action kung fu movie, you gotta like Rapid Fire. If you don't, if you like romantic comedies,
you're not gonna like it to begin with. All right. I always say on the show, like, two of my favorite movies are Basket Case and Taxi Driver. Do I know one's probably better than the other? For you? Yes, but they both give me the same. I both are very entertained by both movies.
Yeah, I wish that sometimes the taste makers would come along and join the party, but generally people. Do you remember when when you were a kid, it was all about what band you liked?
Right.
It was like, and if you liked a band, and somebody would be, oh, they suck, man. How can you even like them? And it becomes very personal taste.
Mm-hmm.
Like I like Aerosmith, but I hate the Doobie Brothers, whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's what the internet is now today. It's very personal if you like or dislike.
And you just make enemies if you dare to like something that's not popular.
Right.
But that's politics too, right? Everybody's
yes, it is. Yeah.
They just hate. How dare you?
Mm-hmm. Yes, the last few years it's very very strange. It's a very polarizing world out there.
Well, we're in for a wild ride now. The next year is going to be wild, right?
Yeah, it will be wild. I don't know if it'll be good or not, but it'll definitely be wild.
Yeah.
So, so the Phantom of the Opera, The poster really goes into, it even says like he was Freddy and now he's the Phantom. Was that your decision? And looking
Oh no,
back, do you think that was like too far to
that
like
was a
go?
huge mistake, and they felt like that's all they had was to try and tie. They even tried to make him look like Freddy in the
Yeah, he
post.
doesn't really look like he does in the movie
No,
on
they
the
tried to
poster.
make it look like it's Freddy and the Phantom, Freddy and the Opera is what they should have called it. And a bunch of kind of crass, craven marketing people thought that gimmick would get asses in the seats, as they say, and it didn't, and it missold the movie. There are some wonderful, beautiful posters for that movie from the European release. Very elegant, very artistic posters, one sheets. And I think if they had just trusted the movie a little bit more and sold it for the music and the feeling, and yes, there's a horror element to it, but sell the love story, I think they would have done better. But they just went lowbrow and tried to pass it off as a as a carnival barker thing, and it backfired.
Yeah. What was the decision to instead of like the traditional like half mask, he sews the skin on, which I think is really cool, and I also think it kind of goes into the idea of in your version he's like cursed, so he's got like this skin that doesn't decay or anything, but he just has to keep sewing it onto his face.
Well, we were trying to figure out how to do a mask. There have been so many versions done with an actual mask,
Mm-hmm.
and it seemed like, how are you going to do that again? The Lon Chaney, Herbert Lom, or whatever, and of course, in the Lloyd Webber on Broadway, it's the famous Phantom's Mask. So we thought, well, this will be really interesting and gory if he needs the skin of his victims in order to make a mask. It
Yeah,
seemed
and it's also
scary.
cool that it's actually it pains him to sew them onto his face. So I think that really
Yeah,
just
and
adds to.
it was grisly to watch, and it was very grisly. That was interesting. I think the deal with the devil, we were trying to make that connection to the Faust, the opera that they were doing, the Faustian bargain, that he had made a Faustian bargain that if he was deformed, that his music would last forever, that he'd be an immortal, like like Beethoven and Mozart, that he'd be an immortal, and so that's the deal he made with the devil, and it cost him. And so later, in the many years later in New York, the young actress, finds this opera, and then the opera is brought back to life, which catapults her back in time. And I thought it was all very interesting, personally.
Yeah. And that was a big difference from what I've read online, actually, because online they say that the bookend of the movie that takes place in modern day was there because of the planned sequel. Then I'm reading your book, and that wasn't even in the original script. It was something that you added to make the character more modern, like a modern woman.
Yeah, and that was a bit mercenary, to be fair, because we wanted like to open the movie instead of in 19th century England. We wanted to feel more of the moment, and so we made her a Juilliard student, in the present. And then when the story's over, she comes back. There's a very haunting shot of her walking down the New York streets, and the guy plays the thing, and she turns, and that this haunting music is still going to follow her wherever she goes. It's very creepy. And of course, Robert is this theater impresario in this weird apartment with these masks lined up. That was wild.
Yeah, I love it. And it really ties into like an original Universal monster movie because a majority of those are about these timeless loves like the Mummy and
Right.
Dracula. And so I think it made it feel like a classic horror movie and also an updated one with gore and stuff.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of fans of the movie. They just had to let go of their expectations and just let the movie wash over them.
Hmm.
Also, we also had a very young Bill Nye in that movie.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's actually a really cool cast all around.
Yeah.
And I also read, I don't know if there's any truth to this, that Dance Macabre was the sequel, then they rewrote it into Dance Macabre.
I was not involved with the sequel. I know that Robert had been speaking with Menachem Golan at length about it. And I just was never in that loop, so I can't really comment on it. Mm-hmm. But my movie, the bookends were intended for that movie. We weren't just trying to
set up something like a franchise or something. Yeah. You're honest in the book about your affair with Jill, making Phantom, and so how does that affect your role as a director? Does that, instead of thinking about like what's best for the movie, does that affect like, oh, I want to appease, the person I'm in a relationship with?
Well, it does affect, the power dynamic between a director and the actor. It's not healthy. It's not a good idea.
Right.
Because now that power shifts. And I only mentioned it in the book, really. I guess the cautionary tale may be the right word. This is, no beef on anybody, but it's, it's better to keep the professional.
Yeah. So, what would be your advice to someone? Because you're very honest in the book about there's great big moments in your career, and then if a movie doesn't go well, like, things can be bad for you. What would be your advice to someone who wants to get into movies?
Well, I do think you have to you have to very early on find a brand of, like, everything is branded. Like, what do you bring to the party? Like, are you really an expert in thriller or horror or comedy, or like what do you have that makes you, a movie director with something to offer? And then I think if you choose to go to film school or not, make sure that first short, whatever that first short that you do, because a lot of people start with, doing a short of some kind. Sometimes it's in the context of being in film school, and sometimes it's outside. But do something that reflects what you want your first feature to feel like. Like, do that. And then when you've put together, if you can, your first feature by, cobbling together some money and shooting it on a black magic or whatever, make sure that that's who you are. You don't want to confuse people. It's like, well, wait a minute, I thought he was this comedy guy. And then they get confused, and then that's not good. Also, when you're up for assignments, people want to know when you walk in the room, like, can he or she do this movie? Like, if you're doing a very intimate, indie drama, you're probably not going to just bring in the guy who just did Terrifier 2.
Right.
That's just not going to be the meeting you want to have.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be very pragmatic about how are you going to turn your talent into a living, because it's not a hobby. This is not something you can do for fun. Now, if you teach, or you've got a bicycle shop that you run during the week, or if this is a hobby, then do whatever the hell you want, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about paying your groceries and your light bill and your car payment off of this life, then you have to be like, how am I going to monetize this thing that I'm trying to do? Like, when I go into the room for a meeting, like, why should they pick me? Mm-hmm. It's not fooling around. You know what I mean? Because your livelihood is going to depend on this.
It's interesting you said about short film, because I do I go to a lot of festivals, and I often wonder the thought process behind making short films. Like, because I know a lot of people who make them and then make a feature, but I know a lot of people who just make short films but never make anything else, and that's fine if they enjoy doing that. But like you can't really sell that as a DVD.
Well, that kind of
There's
is
very limited platforms they can go on.
That's kind of a hobby, right? That's kind of something you enjoy doing.
I guess, yeah.
You're not expecting cash back.
But some of them, will raise like tens of thousands on Indiegogo or whatever, which I never understand to put that much money into a short film. But I don't know. But I like the idea that's what I've always thought was like, if you make a short film, this is what I hey, this is what I can do with a feature film if I'm given the shot.
Well, it's kind of an advertisement a lot of times for the feature version. I think Lights Out was a short film that they made into. I think there've been several shorts that have been.
The movie did really well recently. Talk to Me. The people that did that, like they make shorts on YouTube.
Yep, they're a good example. I do think it's a little bit of an anomaly, and I'll tell you why. Because they were able to access the Australian Film Commission and a lot of government money to put that together because of whatever their Australian cred was. We don't have anything equivalent to that here. We don't have the Canadian Film Board, or there is no place to go to apply for a grant, or to get the American something fund. This is business here. There's not money. Now they'll get plenty of money, right? Because Talk to Me was a big hit.
Yeah. So
they can come to America now and they can get financed. But to get their first film done, and they spent money on that. It's a good looking movie.
Yeah. I thought it was one of the best horror movies of the year.
Yeah, it was but it was well professionally done.
It looks good. Yeah.
And the acting also was excellent. But I have complaints about the story, but the acting was excellent. But you can't do that here. There is no fund that you can apply for. So they had a real leg up. And if you look at the head credits of that movie, the first thing that comes up is something Australian. The second thing that comes up is in association with Australian something. And they have government money that they spend on not indigenous, but people of Australia making them. So they're lucky in a sense because it hit. Now they can raise money now.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Terrifier 2 just a little while ago. Do you think that movie being so successful that is beneficial for like independent directors? After that. Not
really. It's a one-off. I mean, I know there was a Terrifier 1, but
right.
But that's too niche in my view. It's so gore porny, and it's not really fair because I haven't seen it, but I've seen it.
I've seen it, yeah. But it is. I have a weird love for it because I saw it in a theater with like normal audiences, and for me, as someone who's watched a lot of crazy stuff, there is like it's kind of fun that I'm watching this really gory, more graphic than probably anything I've seen in a theater. And like, it's people who think they're going to see like The Conjuring or something and they leave. So I have to me, that was kind of fun, but it's almost like a troll, I guess.
Well, he's had a creepy phase for sure.
I like the movie too, but I like the first one better.
It's like, going all the way back to Blair Witch and how that created this found footage thing. Except for Clover, there wasn't much follow-up on that. It's not like, I mean, everybody tried it, right?
Yeah.
Everybody then tried to copy that, and it didn't really. I mean,
once you see it, it's hard to like recapture that same.
Right. Vibe. That was a breakthrough, low-budget indie horror that hit.
I think it was the perfect time for the internet for Blair Witch, where it was big enough people were on it, but it wasn't too big where people knew that this was a movie. Because there was this weird thing about, is it this real video that someone found? There was like a real buzz about if this was.
Yeah. No, and it had its own gritty kind of a realism about it. It was kind of scary. But horror is a tricky genre. It works and it doesn't. For everyone that, what's the reason? Well, Smile worked, Barbarian worked, Cobweb not so much. But they every so often one will break through. Mm-hmm. But then there's, fields upon fields of ones that you've never heard of.
But it is more of a genre where the smaller movies do at least have a chance of people checking it out.
That's right.
But, like a low budget drama, I mean, it's possible, but every year there's a few low budget horror movies that do well at the theater.
That's right. And now a little subgenre that's working on VOD, westerns. There's a little subgenre of westerns that are doing okay. I don't know why, but they exist. You get Cole Hauser and you put him in a western.
I actually didn't know this. Yeah, I didn't know.
That's an interest. That's quite a world. It's a real thing, and they shoot them for cheap in Tucson on an old western sets, and there's a lot of them, and they usually a lot of times they get country stars to appear in them. And people who don't know that world aren't aware.
Yeah.
But there is a subgenre of indie westerns that's pretty flourishing. Otherwise, you have to have cast, right? If it's a romance or if it's something, you have to have breakthrough cast, pretty much.
Yeah, there's not really like Clerks, but that's like 30 years ago. But there's no movie like that today where it's like this real low budget, weird comedy drama that just all of a sudden.
It just doesn't happen now. There's not a theatrical window for that.
Yeah.
I don't know the last thing I saw on any of the streamers, except for the one I just saw with Benicio del Toro, that was really any good. But we'll see how this all works. First, the first thing that has to happen is the Screen Actors have to settle their deal so we can we can't even right now make offers to actors. Can't package a movie because they're not allowed to even engage with looking at scripts. So we need to get that deal done.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts on AI written movies or AI in general in movie making?
Oh, I just think it's like having a really good assistant next door in your office. I don't think it means anything. I think it's
like another tool.
It's just a tool. It's just it's overhyped beyond belief. I mean, it's like I call it super Google. I mean, yeah, it's there, but people are going to learn how to use it as a tool. But you can't take a collage of a John Grisham book and this script and just come up with a montage and say that's a screenplay. To me, I think I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I just think it's completely overhyped. It's going to be.
Friends who think the same thing. So yeah.
I mean, you can go to ChatGPT. I have ChatGPT.
Yeah. Well, last time I was in LA, my friend Michael, he did he just did a bio of me, and it did like 30 seconds, and it was pretty wild, and it was fairly accurate. There's a couple things I would add to change, but overall, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But I could see how you could do that, and you could go in and just correct the stuff that needed correcting, and it gave me like a basic outline.
Well, but that's not the end of the world, right?
No. It was a lot of stuff that it would just been busy work to write, really.
Yeah, I think academia is going to have a problem with it because you can just say, who was responsible at Yorktown for such and such a thing, and you're going to get a paper pretty quickly because that is redigestible information. Mm-hmm. But an original screenplay, original idea, original teleplay worked out by a writer. I don't know why everybody's so up in arms about it, honestly.
There's a new AI program for Adobe to help with like bad audio. So I've been using on some of the old podcasts, like before there was an easier way to record stuff. And I've had really good success with it. And a few times it changes audio words, which is very strange. But overall, like it works real. And again, that's just like a tool to help clean
Well,
up like
it's just like
background
you have
noises.
an assistant next door.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Clean this up for me, and I just hit
Yeah,
a button and it works. Yeah.
yeah. So you just it's more power in certain ways. Like if you're researching a book, um, you can just get quick answers.
I guess. Yeah. I guess you could have even like when you mentioned Google for when that first came out, people would be like, oh well. This is taking away the power of the library or the encyclopedia or something because you can
Well,
just
it
type it in
did.
and look it up, right? Yeah.
But all these technologies, they settle in. I don't think we're all going to have robots coming down the hallway with our glass of wine.
Yeah. So you did not write "Still Rolling Inside the Hollywood Dream Factory" with
Yeah,
ChatGPT.
well, see, but that's a perfect example since you've looked at the book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you imagine that any of that could come out of anything other tn one guy's brain?
Right.
I mean, there's my
Because the amount, honestly, when I was looking up some stuff about particularly like Phantom and Halloween 4, a lot of stuff I looked up was incorrect. So if you would have just done it with that, it would have been filled with stuff that was just what other people said on Wikipedia, and it wouldn't be,
right.
And you wouldn't have the personal stories in it.
Right. It's all very personal. And I think all art is very personal. And it's not, even something like Oppenheimer. I mean, this is like, there's been how many books written about Oppenheimer and how many biographies and how much historical detail. But this was one guy's point of view on how all that happened.
Yeah, that's a good point because I actually read the book that it's based on after because I like the movie so much. I listened to a lot of audiobooks, and even just when I started listening, the stuff about him in school is much different in the book that it's based on than the movie.
Well, and Nolan has his own artistic point of view
Sure.
that he brings to it, and that's what makes it a film. So I don't know. I think this will settle down and people will just go back to work. I think people will use AI.
Sure. Yeah, and we use it a lot anyway already. That even just like different things on your phone, like filters. I mean, that's AI.
Sure. And I don't know about you, but I can tell. I mean, maybe it'll get better, but I can tell a fake Tom Hanks from a real Tom Hanks.
Right.
It doesn't really trick me very much.
Yeah. The thing that's weird about that to me is when they use like deceased actors. I always wonder, like, would they want to be in this, and who like gets credit, who gets paid for that?
Yeah, usually some estate owns the rights, right, to something like that. I mean, that's a legal reuse question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're going to put Spencer Tracy into a movie, you need permission from Spencer Tracy's estate to do that. I mean, that's a legal thing. I would.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of what the strikes are about too. Is about just guidelines for certain things. Like I have some friends who've done background in movies in LA, and they started to scan people, and the idea was they would just use like scans of people instead of hiring like background players in the future. And so stuff like that is just they have to figure out like what a way to compensate people and.
Well, I don't think that's a hard one to figure out. I mean, if they're going to scan your image on the day that you showed up, and you crossed in the courthouse steps in the background, and they scanned that, and you're dressed a certain way with a briefcase, if they want to reuse that shot of you walking up the courthouse steps, they should have to pay you some little just a reuse fee, right?
Yeah.
But it's not really very complicated. I mean,
no, it should be almost common sense stuff. Like they
right,
can't just scan you and just use you forever without,
Well, they've been using background crowds, what they call panels, for years, where you fill a stadium with 80,000 spectators, and they're all digital, but they're digital creations, so there is no human that they're copying. I mean, it's all created in the computer. But most of those huge crowd scenes you see, and they don't fill up the stadium.
Mm-hmm. So are you working on anything currently, or do you have plans to?
I have two movies that I'm stirring the pot with. Again, one of them I would call, it's a little bit in the, it's going all the way back. The modern take would be sort of like a Taken. The old version it's like a Billy Jack Death Wish, straight ahead Clint Eastwood movie. A guy who comes into a town. It's an action vehicle that I really like. I think it's very, very of the moment. With fentanyl and cartels and all this stuff. So I'm working on that, and I do have a sci-fi alien movie.
Oh, cool.
That I'm working on called Fast Walkers, that's coming together. So yeah, but we've all been out here. We've all been frozen for many months. Mm-hmm. I mean, completely frozen. I can't be on the phone to talk to the writers. I can't be on the phone with the producers to talk about casting. It's just, we're really stuck.
Mm-hmm. And where can people get your book? I believe it's on Amazon.
Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, that's the usual suspects. It's like Amazon's the easiest. It's also at Barnes and Noble, and it's at barnesandnoble.com and all the online sites. It's there. It's also at the publisher, McFarland Press. Also, you can go to my personal website, which is dwightlittledirector.com. And there's a button there where you can link to it. So it's, as long as you type in "Still Rolling" inside the Hollywood Dream Factory, you can find it anywhere. And Natty Knocks, as you mentioned, is now on Tubi, and it's on other, YouTube and iTunes and things like that. So it's out there for people to see if they want to just enjoy a Halloween movie.
Yeah, no, it's the perfect season for it. So,
yeah, it really is.
As you can tell behind me.
That's right.
Yeah, and real quick too, maybe kind of a hack question, but what are some of your favorite horror movies? Maybe you inspired you to become a director.
Well, it wasn't just horror with me. I was a little more of an action guy, but I was pretty taken with Silence of the Lambs, like everybody was, just because the artistry of that and the performance and the real terror of it. I think I was absolutely crippled when the first time I saw The Exorcist. I just went back to some friend's house. We were 15 maybe, and we just couldn't go home. We stayed up. That's probably the most terrifying thing I ever saw as a young.
Yeah, no, I think it still holds up. And I read the book for the first time recently, and the audiobook is a great novel. Yeah.
There's another one coming out, but yeah, I would say The Exorcist. Yeah. I never really loved Poltergeist per se, but The Exorcist stands out. I really liked the street action movies like French Connection and some of the Roger Corman stuff. There was more like action movies. I liked all that. I do have this highbrow side of me, mm-hmm. And I love I'll give you some examples, like L.A. Confidential, Wonder Boys, Amadeus, a movie like American Beauty. I think is almost like a perfect movie. So some of the Oscar bait movies, I just think what we used to be Oscar movies. Right. It's that bar has been lowered beyond to the point. It doesn't really. It's just all. It's all political posturing now. They lost their ability to do it. I mean, I loved Nomadland. I thought Nomadland was an interesting indie. I think that belonged in in a Laemmle theater, and it was a good indie movie, but it's not an Oscar movie. It's just an interesting.
I don't think I've even seen it.
Yeah, it won Best Picture.
Okay, yeah. I used to really, I'm not someone who hates the Oscars or anything. I mean, it's something I grew up watching, but I haven't paid attention to it as much as I used to.
Well, because they're not, the level of artistry is not up there at the level where you'd think of as, The English Patient or something. It's not at that level. And now, there's a Korean movie that won an Oscar. There was a movie about a deaf fisherman or something. A very good movie, but it's what I would have called in the old days like a really good after school special. I mean, it was, it was a well-meant movie, but it's not an Oscar movie. It just wasn't. So I miss the ambition of Gladiator, like Russell Crowe in a Ridley Scott film that fills the screen and takes you. The opening sequence from Gladiator is beyond description. That opening battle is just in the snow. So I'm a sucker for the big Hollywood.
I think some of that is a lot of it used to be big Hollywood movies were also good movies. Whereas a lot of the bigger movies now are, I mean, that's fine if you like the Marvel movie stuff, but they're just kind of big, kind of dumb action movies, I guess.
Yeah, they've run their course, I think.
Like Fast and the Furious, is that going to be up for an Oscar? I wouldn't think so, but
Well,
I don't know. I've actually never even seen any of them, but
they're cartoons.
Yeah.
People are.
But I mean, it used to be like a blockbuster movie, like Jaws is like a great movie, and it's also a big, Indiana Jones. Those kind of movies were still really good movies.
Yeah, although this last one was like, hey.
Well, yeah. Well, there you go. It was a young Indiana Jones at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, it just didn't work out. All right. Well,
it's been very fun.
Thank you for having me join your.
Yeah, no, I had a great time. I hope you did as well.
Yeah, very great. It was very great, and yeah, definitely. If people, you looked at the book, so if people are interested really in film, and I hope you got a few interesting insights from reading it.
I definitely did. Yeah, and I hope people check it out. I know a lot of horror fans watching this, but a lot of just movie fans are watching this, so I think people will like it.
All right. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.